Namaskar, Nilesh Oak here in another episode. This time we are going to discuss what is a scientific evidence. Some of you would find this topic interesting or strange rather, because most of us know, and most of us at least definitely think that we all of us know what a scientific evidence is. And that may be so. I don't think so, but that may be so. I'm willing to give a benefit of doubt. However, based on the YouTube comments that my team sends to me for a quick look, some of them I read them myself, but also number of emails, independent emails that I receive, and I don't truly have a chance to respond to them, so I do not respond to most of them, 99% of them, by the way. And also, when I give lectures, and then there is always a question answer session, and during that session also, based on what people ask as questions or as doubts, combining all of this, I can tell you that most people do not understand what is a scientific evidence. Interestingly, when something is not scientific, okay, something is just kind of statement, opinion, okay, quoted by somebody without even without even providing a truly empirical evidence, or truly connecting these dots via empirical evidence, logic, what I will call Tantra Shastra, Tarka Yukti, and Vijnana Buddhi together, and they will say that evidence will convince them. On the other hand, a scientific evidence does not convince them because they don't even realize that it is a scientific evidence. And I think most people simply don't know how to distinguish between a scientific evidence and just evidence in the sense of they read it somewhere, it is written in some book, it is written in our grantha, somebody said something, somebody's opinion, some person in authority said something, and therefore it must be true. So there is all kinds of nonsense on one side, and then there is a empirical scientific evidence which people don't understand that it is a scientific evidence. So I'm going to take one example to make some of the points related to this, and we will hopefully use this as an example as to what scientific evidence is. In future, I will share additional claims, additional evidence, and then discuss which one can qualify as a scientific evidence, which one cannot qualify as scientific evidence, and why in both cases. All right, so let's jump into the presentation. Where am I? Here. Okay, what is a scientific evidence? Okay. All right. Again, everyone should become familiar, if you already are not, with this DCM, doubt clearing machine. This is the logic of scientific method. We start with a tough problem. To solve that tough problem, not already solved successfully by anyone else before, that's why it's a tough problem. Okay, don't solve the problem solved by others. Either copy their solution, okay, or provide an inferior solution. Don't do that. Of course, many are doing it, and my guess is many will continue to do that stupidity. But let's move on. So there is a tough problem to be solved, and then we use this 5-step framework, what's called the logic of scientific method, or in the Indian context, something developed by likes of Sage Gautama for thousands and thousands of years. In antiquity, we don't know exactly when it was done, but definitely the way it comes to us through the book Darshana Shastra Nyaya Darshana, which is attributed to Sage Gautam. So 5 steps in the modern scientific language, it's the triangulation of explanation, prediction, testing in the context of a theory and in the context of background knowledge. And if you put sufficient efforts and if you are lucky, you may successfully solve it, bring all these dots together, and it would lead you to a scientific and logical solution. And then, of course, we can further critique that based on any of these 5 elements. So just because we have done it, that's not to say that you cannot go back to that solution and question it, critique it. Okay, it's all right as long as your goal is to get closer to the truth, satyameva jayate fashion. Okay, and as long as your goal is to assist others, as long as your goal is to make yourself understand what the argument is, the criticism, the critique is actually very much welcome. That's why in that context we call it vade vade jayate tattva bodho. Okay, it leads to growth of knowledge and it leads to our comprehension. All right, now who will not understand this, or who we should not bother telling this? In that sense, I like this format, which is to say, I create episodes like this, okay, upload them on a YouTube, and you know what? I'm not asking anyone, any specific person to watch it, or any specific individual to not watch it. And therefore, it's kind of left it to people's to their decision. Now, Bhagwan Krishna in Bhagavad Gita tells in the summary chapter, 18th chapter, tells this to Arjun. After telling all this wonderful knowledge, he says, Idam te na tapaskaya, na bhaktaya kadachana, na chashu shrushave vacham, na cha mamyo bhyasuyati. Just a quick, simple, useful, crude translation. He's saying, do not explain this to anyone who is not, 3 points there, hardworking and efforts driven, that is that tapaskaya, tapasya, balanced, who has a balanced mind, balanced intellect, balance and samyak, equanimity, who has not attained equanimity, a objective attitude. This person will also struggle and suffer, and therefore you may be wasting time too. Na bhaktaya. So bhakta, we have, when I say we, many have made it into a very reductionist understanding of what bhakta means, like who goes to the mandir and does the puja every day and chants the name of a certain deity and so on. And definitely these are very much part of that bhakti, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atma Nivedana, Vividha type of bhakti, that's true. However, the objective behind all these actions is to build, develop a samyak mind, a samyak intellect, a balanced mind and objective attitude, okay? Sthita prajna attitude, that you don't get just disturbed by minor things. But the objective attitude is the critical part as far as what I am discussing today, that is what is a scientific evidence. Otherwise, the ragadvesha moha, as Nyayadarshana says, if they enter, it will always prevent you from understanding the true meaning, the true comprehension of what is being presented. The third possibility, that's something we should always watch for, is somebody who is not desirous of hearing and learning. Na chashu shrushve, so the person who is not interested in hearing this, not learning this, there is no point telling it to him or her. And therefore I said this particular format I like, because I can say what I want to cover and leave it to others to decide if they want to listen to it or not. Then the last point, it says, or don't also nacha mamyo bhyasuyati, the person who is envious. And Krishna in this context representing himself as the whole, the everything, like Vishweshwar you can say, okay. He is saying the one who is envious of me, but you can say the one who is envious of anybody, okay. The person who is presenting something and somebody in the audience is envious of the person who is presenting, the problem is the person may not even listen to what is being presented. So person, if you feel that this is envious, he is envious, she is envious, not hardworking, not willing to put own efforts to understand this, not sincere about it, not balanced, doesn't have an objective attitude towards comprehension or towards understanding the problem, and not desirous of hearing and learning the specific subject we may be discussing, there is no point telling them. Now, of course, I'm putting this on a YouTube, so I don't have to make a choice. But my point is, if you fall into any of this category and you try, and that's what happens when many folks give the comments on the YouTube. Like, they will listen to this whole thing. The entire evidence would be, the entire presentation would be filled with evidence. And usually that's how my talks are. In fact, I always worry, am I giving too much evidence and therefore making it kind of dry? But the very funny thing that I find is that there is no, dearth of idiots out there, dearth of people with very low intellect, okay? And in their comments or otherwise, they will say, well, sir, I listened to you, but where is the evidence? And some people will make really funny comment, So that's because either raga, dvesha, moha, or the four of the possibilities that I have mentioned. So the dvesha is like that enviousness right there, okay? Raga is the emotion, which means lack of balance, samyak attitude, okay? And muda, which is what? The person does not understand that, ours is a mumukshu civilization, a seeker civilization. Nobody is going to come and spoon feed anything to you. Out of kindness, many people put efforts to help others understand, okay, for various reasons. We will not go into those, but this is not a spoon feeding type of society. This is not a spoon feeding type of civilization, okay? And this is not somewhere people will force things on you. They will tell the things to you in good spirit, okay, in good faith, and hope that if you are truly desirous of learning, hearing, then you will do it, okay? So this is what the meaning behind this particular shlok from Bhagavad Gita. Otherwise, many people also confuse this, although that's not the subject today. But I was also wondering why Krishna said something like this. I remember at least 35, I'm trying to count the day, the years, let's say 30, my God, no, this is getting too long now, okay? I was going to say 35 years. No, this is almost like a 45 years ago. I used to have this question, okay, why Krishna is saying this? Now I understand very well. There is no point telling somebody who is not willing to put one's own effort to understand this. Some people are so foolish that they think they are doing a great favor by listening to someone, okay? That's how degraded our society has become. By our society, I mean worldwide, okay? So these four things, if somebody doesn't have it or have them, depending on whether not versus yes, then we have a problem. So that's how we have to understand some of the comments or some of the questions, whether you hear them on the YouTube, whether you hear them say after speakers talk during the question answer, people going on a tangent. Many times, I would have said this, given a wonderful explanation. Somebody says, so for example, like I would have spent like 1 hour explaining all the detail archaeology evidence in support of, say, flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka in 5525 BCE, 36 years after the Mahabharat war, which is 5561 BC. And then, a couple of people would say, okay, so thank you very much, that was a great lecture. Now, is there any archaeology evidence for flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka? And in Marathi, there is a saying like, Gadva pude vasli Gita, kalsa gondal bara hota. Or you say the whole Ramayana, and then somebody asks, so please tell me, like, what is the relationship between Bhagwan Ram and Sita? Which means the person was not paying attention, or the person simply does not have a ability, intellect to comprehend. In fact, very recently, I think it was on Twitter, my co-researcher Rupa Bhattiji was trying to explain one of our mutual trolls, we should say, a very simple thing, like how the understanding that the orbits of all our planets, and that includes the sun, moon, and of course the other planets of the solar system, how all of them have elliptical orbits, and how that was known to Indians for a very long time. And by very long time, we are talking thousands and thousands of years. In fact, we have evidence that directly points to we knowing this in say Mahabharata times, we knowing this in Ramayana times, and we knowing about it before. But very unsuccessfully, I should say, my co-researcher Rupa Bhattiji was trying to convince this mutual troll, like why that is so. In fact, the funny thing was, this is a maybe I'll talk about it sometime. But this is the some translation of one Surya Siddhanta verse. That's the debate about it, let's say, going on for now what 7+ years. Like we presented this at Oxford conference in 2018, and everyone was extremely fascinated since then, the people who were at the conference or otherwise. And this fellow who doesn't have his own solutions, I mean, he will jump into Vitanda at a drop of a hat. But anyways, Rupa Bhattiji and this individual were having back and forth on this translation. And on Twitter, I think she was trying to convince him. And I said, why? And the simple one is go to this verse. Like, the person is not willing to put efforts, especially in the area where he understands nothing, or rather, almost he is now building a reputation for misunderstanding everything. Okay, almost like understanding the wrong way. Again, I can give you many simple metaphors, but that will, digress the whole subject. Anyways. Doesn't have or doesn't appear to have this balanced attitude that's very much required. The objective attitude to understand is desirous of hearing. He's not interested in hearing and learning, and it is our perception that he is extremely envious. In fact, one well-known Indic researcher pointed to me about this mutual troll, like, and I didn't know even the name that time. I can't tell you exactly when now. My memory is not that sharp anymore. I like to think 10+ years ago or something like that. Anyways, 8+ years. And this individual said, well, this guy wants to be you. I said, what do you mean? Like, well, this guy wants to be you as in like Nilesh Oak, and says, in what aspect? And this person who was Indologist was telling me, I said, yeah, I don't know, but it appears like in every aspect, maybe the Ramayana dating, Mahabharata dating, the astronomy, if none of this, just wants to be as popular as you. And I said, well, anyone can be popular, and of course with efforts, and there are people who are much more popular than me. Why would this mutual troll would want to be as popular as me? And we just had some humorous chat about that, and that's that. And I did not even know who this guy is. I mean, I still don't know. Now, of course, I know the name, and we have had some back and forth conversations at some different forums, but that's about it. In fact, what this Rupa Bhattiji was having, this particular debate about the translation, may be related to that, or some other reference related to my research work on Ramayana or Mahabharata. This same individual pulled out some conflict. I tried to answer it, and I have to go back and see within like a 2 or 3 back and forth conversation. This was through email at some Google forum, Bharatiya Vidvat Parishad, and I realized this guy is just has no ability to even understand the basics. So in a polite way, and if that's still preserved, I can find out what I wrote there, but in a very polite way, I just said, hey, you know what, because I had quoted this individual before in one of my books. I said, hey, because it appeared that you are knowledgeable about this subject, so I had some respect for you, so therefore when you ask, therefore I tried to answer. But it's not going anywhere. You are wasting my time. I wish you well, and bye-bye. Warm regards. Okay, in a polite way, get lost. And I stopped conversation with this individual. And so therefore when Rupa Bhattiji was trying to convince this guy, and I just said, my God, why bother? I mean, a sincere attempt to make somebody understands, I mean, it is like a great service. But if the other person doesn't even appreciate it and does not have a ability, and that's what Krishna is referring to, adnyasya shraddha dhanasya samshayatma vinashyati. You don't have even a basic knowledge to understand what is being discussed. You don't have a shraddha, you don't have a respect, or you don't have a trust or a reverence for the person who is trying to help you, and you have a doubtful about everything that they are saying, okay, without any basis. The destruction is what it is. And I think we have to protect ourselves anyway. So this is not for them, because I'm not saying just because of this episode suddenly everyone is going to understand what is the scientific evidence, and some of those comments or some of those foolish questions I get after my lectures, they will stop. No, they will continue. Now sometime if there is a sincerity about it, then I don't mind them, as long as they are willing to do the hard work. I'll say, guys, why don't you read this book or my blogs or this? But if they're not willing to do this, then their time has not come. Anyways, so as an example, I'm going to use this epoch of Brihadratha. Again, this is work of Rupa Bhattiji, and it points to this time of 34,500 BCE. That's like add like a 2,000 years, so that's 36,500 BC. So I will use either 36,000 years ago, or I will say 34,500 BCE. Okay, all right. So what's the problem that we are going to solve? Well, in Maitrayani Aranyak Upanishad, there are few references related to this Ikshvaku king Brihadratha. And using that information, Rupa Bhattiji tried to make sense of about the epoch of this king Brihadratha, the epoch of, or the timing of this Brihadratha. Okay, so what is the theory? I mean, she has not stated it, but Rupaji and myself, we discuss a lot, so I feel reasonably confident that she would not disagree with this statement of a theory that I have formulated for the problem that she already solved very successfully. Okay, it's just an amazing epoch in the Indian civilization. And this is not the beginning, guys, okay? This is just scratching the surface, but that itself takes us back to 36,000 years in antiquity. Anyways, so the theory statement would be like this: descriptions of Maitrayani Aranyak Upanishad about Ikshvaku king Brihadratha are of his times. Okay? Now this is a hypothesis, guys. We are trying to validate what it is. Now some people don't understand that, because all that we do, we end up corroborating. And then you have to also still have a shraddha, that there is nothing here that basically says, oh, therefore you should have a shraddha, or therefore I am going to have a shraddha. It's a very subjective judgment, as much as it may sound, which is to say, if you don't have a shraddha, even if no matter what kind of scientific evidence is given to you, you will not understand. And that's what Krishna is referring to, adnyasya ashraddha dhanasya samshayatma vinashyati. Yes, there are two additional elements. The person should have a reverence who he or she is listening to, and person should have some basic background knowledge, a basic minimum level of intellect, a logical reasoning skills, vijnana buddhi. Otherwise he or she will not understand. So what are some of the descriptions? Again, the point I want to show you is this DCM machine, guys, is the way to understand if there is a scientific evidence or not. Okay, so evidence, one piece of evidence anyways, is that there is a statement essentially that the vernal equinox was at nakshatra Magha. So how are we going to test it? Well, this is astronomy phenomenon. We are going to test it using our astronomy knowledge, mathematical calculations, astronomy software, whatever works for you. So how would we do that? Well, today the vernal equinox is not at Magha. In fact, it is at Uttara Bhadrapada. Okay. 2000 years ago, it was at Ashwini Nakshatra. That's why we say our calendar begins with Ashwini. In fact, we should have made a change. We have not made a change. Very different subject. Not going to go there. So back to this, vernal equinox at Magha. If we just have a basic astronomy 101, then you can use the mathematical calculation. You can just close your eyes and do approximate calculations if you know how to do it. You can use astronomy simulation. It does not matter, at least in this case. Okay. So using that, if you try to align the most recent epoch of vernal equinox with Magha, this is the answer we get. We get the answer of about 8000 BCE. All right, so we did get an answer. And what was the background knowledge we used in this case? Very simple, precession of the Earth's axis. But just like we talked about the auxiliary theory, we have to have some additional knowledge in order to understand what is vernal equinox, what is nakshatra Magha, and what it means that vernal equinox at Magha, and so on. Now, where we see these actual references from Maitrayani Aranyak Upanishad, sometimes people will say, oh, no, that's not vernal equinox, that's actually the point of winter solstice. Somebody may say that's the point of summer solstice. Another person may say that's the point of autumnal equinox. If it is so, guys, that's perfectly fine. But we have to take that issue as another problem before even we come here. Which is to say, how do we know that this particular reference is referring to which cardinal point? Okay, why vernal equinox and why not autumnal equinox, or why not summer solstice, and so on. So here in the background knowledge, I'm going to assume that is agreement there. If not, somebody has to come up with the other answer and just do the comparison and find out which one is a better answer. Okay, we will do that also some other time. So based on this, actually, it appears like the whole equation has been completed. We got the answer 8000 BCE, but I am going to put a note here saying no, actually this did not eliminate the error. Now you would say, why are you saying that? Isn't vernal equinox at Magha in 8000 BC? The answer is yes. However, these descriptions of Maitrayani Aranyak Upanishad in the context of Ikshvaku king Brihadratha have some additional pieces of evidence beyond the timing to be described as vernal equinox at Magha. And one more thing we know, the vernal equinox at Magha is a very kind of unique type of phenomenon, but it is a recurring phenomenon. For example, it did exist in 8000 BC as far as we starting from our times and going backwards in antiquity, because ours is not vernal equinox at Magha, and the first time going backwards we find is 8000 BCE. But this is not the only time. You can go through this precession of the Earth's axis cycle of about 26,000 years, and if you go beyond 8000 plus 26,000 in the past, you will get another event, another instance when vernal equinox was at Magha. And if you add 26,000 years to that, you will get another one, and so on. So what is that additional evidence that we have from Maitrayani Aranyak Upanishad in the context of Ikshvaku king Brihadratha? This is very interesting. I'm making it very simple so that this thing doesn't get too long. The evidence is seas were drying, okay? The water levels were going down, they were drying, and even the lakes were drying. So levels were going down and even completely lakes were drying, but many other phenomena, but definitely seas, oceans were drying, okay? So now, if you want to test this, remember, it is the evidence, it is the theory that decides what can be measured, what is considered as evidence. And once we know what type of evidence we have, it is the evidence that decides what tools we need to objectively test it, and therefore the desired, required background knowledge. In this case, what we need is a knowledge of oceanography, and if we do the testing, what it tells us is that the seas are rising since 20,000 BC. So for simplicity, for the last 20,000 years, the seas are rising. They are not drying up, they are not going down. So it cannot be the time period in the last 20,000 years. And that's why on the previous page, when vernal equinox is at Magha, and I still said the error elimination is not achieved. As far as the astronomy evidence alone, yes, it is achieved. So 8,000, if there was no other evidence, such as seas were drying and so on, oceans were drying and so on, we would have said, yeah, or maybe 8000 BC is the answer. Okay, and we would have stuck there. That's how science works, guys. If that's the only evidence, we would have concluded that the time of King Brihadratha was 8000 BC. Now, there may be some additional evidence, maybe not about the oceanography, that might have allowed us to say, even 8000 BC doesn't make sense, and here is why. Just like we are saying, because the seas were drying, And we know from the background knowledge that the seas were not drying for the last 20,000 years. We say it cannot be in the last 20,000 years. All right, so completing this, we say, okay, so if this prediction has to be true, if this evidence has to be corroborated, we have to go beyond 20,000 years or 20,000 BCE. That's like 22,000 years in antiquity and beyond if we want to corroborate this evidence. So what do we do now? Again, the background knowledge in this case, we are using the oceanography evidence of the last 150,000 years. Why 150,000 years ago? I mean, up for that long? Because such a evidence exists and it's appropriate, it's useful, and it's sufficient for what we are trying to do, at least for now. Okay, so again, we did not achieve the error elimination because now we have to figure it out. How do I bring these two pieces of evidence and match it together, or can I match? So what do I do? Okay, let's look at this. Vernal equinox at Maga plus seas were drying. If I have to do this, what do I need to do? Astronomically, I have to match vernal equinox at Maga, and at the same time I should also test to see that the seas were drying, oceans were drying. So what do we find here? We find that this 8000 BC, so this is where we are today. So if you come here, this is kind of I can't even read, but okay, so somewhere here halfway, that is like where vernal equinox was at Maga, like about 10,000 years ago, 8000 BC. But right from 20,000 sea levels are rising, they are not drying. Okay, so that cannot be it. Now, so you take that point, add a 26,000 years and go back in antiquity, you get this time of 34,500 BCE, and look what happens. Again, we have vernal equinox at Maga plus seas were drying. You see, this is the y-axis is the sea levels, water levels, and x-axis is the time from deep antiquity, 150,000 years here, coming towards us to 0, which is our time. Oh, so we match it. Now, what is the conclusion? Therefore, for these two pieces of evidence being corroborated together, the prediction is 34,500 BCE. We are using logic, we are using hard empirical evidence, such as from astronomy to decide when vernal equinox was at Maga, and the oceanography evidence to decide when the suns were drying, the sea levels were going down, and when they were not going down, to eliminate those possibilities. Okay? And the background knowledge, of course, is both oceanography and astronomy precession of the Earth's axis. Now, is there any additional evidence? Actually, there's a lot, but I'm just going to, this is just illustration, and this is sufficient, by the way. If you think it's not sufficient, go back to Maitrayani Aranyak Upanishad, look at the additional evidence and come up with a alternate answer. And if it does not match with what Rupa Bhattiji has done or what I'm showing, publish, write blogs, talk about it, come debate with us. Okay, so otherwise you are doing within the wasting time. Don't be like our mutual trolls, okay, who are completely busy doing utter nonsense, all kinds of stupidity. At least when they're interacting with us, they may be very good at something else. Okay, we have no objection to that, but at least our limited experience of last 7 years, anytime they are interacting with us, it is pure stupidity, extreme enviousness. And I wonder, enviousness of what? If they put themselves in our shoes, they will realize what a hard work it is that one has to do on this side of the screen. Okay, anyways, so I'm taking one additional piece of evidence. Vernal equinox at Maga, seas were drying, and bright pole star, not start, forgive me there, shifting. And so again, pole star is related to astronomy. So if we try to align now vernal equinox at Maga, seas were drying, that kind of oceanography data, and some bright pole star shifting. Now, pole star shifting, we are always going to find some pole star, but we can limit ourselves and say, hey, you know what? It should be visible to a naked eye. Okay, that's not necessarily a requirement because it's not like telescopic vision was not there, but you may use that. But I think we have vernal equinox at Maga and seas were drying as two extremely powerful pieces of evidence to check in an objective fashion. So when we do that, yes, actually in 38,000 BC there was a bright star, the Brahma Rashi, which is Abhijit, which is Vega. It was a pole star, just like it was there during the Ramayana times around 12,000 BC. Again, remember, that's also a cycle of 26,000 years for the exactly same reason, the precession of the Earth's axis. Okay, so if you come to like 34,500, which is what 3,000 years after. You are saying, well, that bright star was a pole star, and now it's no longer. It's moving away from the point of NCP, and that's kind of captured into these descriptions in Maitrani Aranyak Upanishad. So again, we validate 34,500 BC, and again the same background knowledge. So in this case, what did we use? We used the two pieces of astronomy data. So this is an empirical, hard, verifiable in the sense of repeatability, reproducibility, linearity, stability type of data. This is what the empirical data is, guys. Okay, we did the same thing with what? In deciding the vernal equinox of Magha, and we did the same thing using oceanography data. This 150,000 years of oceanography data in terms of the sea level rise at any given time and its variation is a hard empirical data, and we are using it, and this is the evidence, guys. And so of course we are talking in a podcast or something. Every time it's not possible to show this, but the idea is we are pointing to that evidence, and the person, again going back, now this is the maybe interesting time giving the presentation backwards, and that's where the idea is that you capture this as a mumukshu, okay, ours being a seeker civilization, and put the required hard work, take the efforts to go back to those references, find it out, build an objective attitude. In fact, if you don't have it, don't waste time, guys. With us, you're not going to understand any damn thing. Okay, and you better be desirous of hearing, learning, which means putting again efforts. Okay, in Sanskrit there is no word for teaching. It's all only adhyapak, shikshak. It's assisting with somebody's education. Okay, helping, sometimes showing through demonstration, through illustrations how I did it, and maybe that tells you, that is that acharya, acharan. Like whatever we are describing, we are trying to implement, doing it ourselves, and even sharing that with the people who may be desirous of hearing and learning, and who have shraddha, and who have tapasya, and who are not envious. All right, so that's it. And of course, the books. Now, why do I show books every time? Actually, I get tired of it. But if I don't show, then somebody comes up with some really funny suggestions. Nileshji, I watch your talk and it's wonderful. Why don't you write some book? And I say, well, I have written the books. I am writing it for a very long time. So these are the 3 books, okay, in English, available via Subbu Publications in India. Then they say, oh, where can I get the book? I mean, as if like people don't know how to search in Google. Okay, it surprises me. I mean, surprises not like about their ability. I don't think that's the issue. Is the laziness that they have. Okay, if you are around the world through Amazon here, and if you are desirous of learning a wonderful language known as Marathi, then Prachin Bharatiya Khagol Vigyan. This is a book published very recently. Is doing great. Pick a book. If you already know Marathi, every reason to. If you don't, every reason to pick it. You can use this as your introduction to the wonderful language of Marathi, Khagol Shastra, Khagol Vigyan 101. So if you already know it, you are going to learn Marathi even faster. You can buy it through this QR code and all that good stuff. Okay, and ditto for the Marathi translation of my book, The Historic Ram, 12,209 BC. The same title, same different titles, same book, translated in Marathi as Aityasik Ram. And when did the Mahabharat war happen has been translated as Mahabharat Kala Nirnay, I think. Okay, it's not in front of me. From same publisher, but this one you can just scan the code, pay the money, and get it delivered at home if you are in India. Repeat, if you are in India, because many times that's another problem. That's how people are careless. Somebody sitting in New Zealand and America and Europe and say, oh, how come my book did not come? Well, it cannot be shipped for 40 rupees. Anyone should know that. But that's it, guys. I'll stop here. Soon I will see you in another episode. Let me know, write your comments, let me know what did you think of this, was this useful. To understand that something is scientific, again, we must go to DCM, the doubt clearing machine, demand that all the five places are filled in, then also demand that the appropriate definitions for each of the 5 points are followed. It is not somebody's opinion. Now, sometimes all that we have is a logic, and I have made few episodes already, which is to say we don't have an objective way of testing it per se. I mean, logically yes, but not objective way as in like a lab, or as it like that oceanography data or astronomy data or so on. Just we use the logic here, okay, and the certain rules of logic. Okay, because people who don't understand logic, even when they are illogical, they don't understand why others are calling them illogical. That's only the Bhagwan can save us from such challenges. All right, write your comments, and I'll see you another time in another episode with another interesting subject. Namaskar. Thank you.